crankcase. It is polished. It is somewhat slip fit, but I didn't take the journals way below tolerances. And we've installed the bearings, so we're going to pull it together. I've got a little bit of two-stroke oil right here. We'll get a little bit of that on the crank. I'm calling it the journal. The bearing slides across that as we assemble it. So a little bit of two-stroke oil on that. And lay the gasket in place. I'm going to set you down and we'll begin assembly. In case you're wondering, my gasket dropped through. Get that on the other alignment pin. Ideally, both alignment pins are on the same case, but that's not the case I intended for this one. Okay. Alright. This is a crank puller. I'll give you some info on that here in just a minute. We're real time. Okay. Now one mistake I made, I didn't get my wrenches out and ready for this. So just bear with me. Gaskets fell off again. Now, that's another thing. Sealant. Can you use it? Yes. Do I use it? Yes. Just not on this one. It's just not what I'm doing on this particular build. Okay, now I have one case bolt in the front already in there, and I'm going to use that to help hold if it'll feed through. Sorry about my head. So we're not hardly far enough along. So, in times past, Matthew has watched a couple of my vids where I assembled a saw and crankcase with this. Somewhat gets on to me. I go about it all wrong, do it the hard way, etc. But I think this is how he's instructed me to do it. We're pulling that together, no problem. Things going smooth. Okay. Turn that case bolt just a little bit. That case bolt is somewhat hidden. Not really hidden, but covered up with Alright, there we go. I'm down pretty good on that. At this point, we actually can pull all this off and use the case bolts to pull everything together. So that's what we're going to do. For those of you that have never seen this, the STIHL tool looks similar. The STIHL tool bolts on the bar studs, and it is quite pricey. But it's Matthew's little setup. So right now I'm just kind of spinning everything off, undoing it. So then we'll install the case bolts and finish up the assembly. It's a nice tool. That was the first interaction I ever had with Matthew Olsen, and it was a good one. He asked me to throw up a review, and I did. Of course, I've assembled 3 or 4 saws on camera. Now on this build, I still have the oil pump in place, and I think that the case screws will slip around it. Yes, they will. I think it's a good engineering intention there on the manufacturer's part. Now once we pull all this together, and you've heard me say this before, I will individually remove these screws one at a time and Loctite them. Back when the Husqvarna 372s first came out, the shop that I worked for had one come in. We didn't sell Husqvarna, but we worked on everything, and the head mechanic looked at that 372 and couldn't figure it out. And the issue was it would start and run great until you laid the saw flywheel down for whatever reason, to limb, or you were falling, you turned the saw flywheel down, it would shut off immediately, like it locked up. Bring it back up right, and it would fire up and run. But what it was, the case bolts had backed out. And on a Husqvarna, the case bolts are underneath the flywheel. 372. Hear that pulling together? Okay, I got one in the front right here. But anyway, that's all from the factory. The case bolts were not torqued or not Loctited, and or both. So I tend to do that on a crankcase. Hear that tightening down? So on top of the cylinder on the deck up here, not the cylinder but the crankcase, remember to trim that off before you stick your cylinder on. Alright, there you have it. Crankcase is assembled, and I will further oil these bearings after the seals are installed, the con rod, and probably put some assembly lube in this area before we fire it, before we start it. But there it is, crankcase build. Like I say, we got to put the seals in, and that's how I do a crankcase. This particular saw, for those of you that are interested, this will be top end number 3 for this saw. So 2 top ends. This is the first set of bearings on this particular saw, and then it'll be top end number 3 that we're fixing to do on this one. Thank you for watching.